case you hadn't heard, we're thinking of presenting the option to our community to move forward with becoming a city. And got a little presentation that we're gonna talk about the process, the thought process behind why we think this is a good idea to present, and then hopefully answer some questions that you guys might have. Let's see if these things work a lot better when they're plugged in. Look at that. So, are you originally from Ohio, or did you move there from Michigan, or?
From Michigan to Ohio,
Okay.
back to Michigan, so.
You came back from the dark side.
Mhm.
So local government in Michigan, cities, villages, and townships. Townships, you got general law, Sherman, Broomfield, you got charter townships, Union Township, so they have their own charter. Charter townships can be done either by the township board or through a vote of the people. The difference is the amount of taxes you can levy. So if the voters approve your township, you can go up to 5. If the township board says, no, we're just gonna do it, I can go up to 2. Villages, you have general law and home rule villages in the great state of Minnesota. Lake Isabella is a home rule village, which means we have our own charter. General law villages, like the village of Shepherd, operate under the General Law Village Act, which is Public Act 5, I think, of 1895. So that act serves as their charter. It spells out how the government has to be structured, all that kind of fun stuff. And in Michigan, we have home rule cities, 5th class cities, 4th class cities, and special charter cities. There's only one special charter city, and you gotta get there by boat. And you eat fudge and smell horses all day. It's Mackinac Island. The general law village, probably have 3. Spells out that this is what you gotta do for your village. Most notably, the differences between what a general law and a home rule village is, which we are the composition of your council. That requires different levels of taxation. So they can do 12.5 for general, 5 for streets, 2.5 for cemeteries, whereas a home rule village, we have some flexibility. So for our 7 members of the council, we have staggered terms. There are 4 years, staggered into 2-year blocks. So in 2026, we have 4 of our 7 members up for election. In 2028, we'll have 3. And of those 7, they elected their own village president, clerk, and treasurer, where in a general law village, the president is elected separately, and you have a different scenario on how you can deal with your clerk and treasurer. Our charter also requires that the council hold a public hearing on all ordinance adoptions, which is not required in a general law village. Home rule villages cannot be disincorporated, and there is a maximum taxation of 20 mills, but it can be taxed in your local or capped in your local charter, which the village of Lake Isabella is at 1 mill. 5th, 4th, and home rule cities. Well, the state of Michigan said, I don't know what we were thinking when we said we're gonna do 5 classes of cities and we only got to 4, so we're just gonna get rid of this stuff. And so in 1980, all 4th class cities were deemed to just be home rule cities. And all but I think 2 or 3 have since adopted their own home rule charters. There's still a couple out there that still operate under the 4th class cities act. 5th class and home rule cities are exactly the same thing with one big difference. And it's not really big, but 5th class cities, you're required to have at-large elections for your legislative body. You can't go by district or ward. And the other change or difference is what population thresholds you have to meet when you go to incorporate. So in a 5th class city, your population 750 to 2,000. If you are an incorporated village pursuing cityhood, you're not required to meet a density requirement if you are in that population range. If you want to become a home rule city, you have to have a population of over 2,000 people and 500 people per square mile. And that's a very important part of this discussion on why we're looking at it now. Because Lake Isabella, according to our 2020 census, is 1,829 people. We are 4.5 square miles total. So if we were going to incorporate as a home rule city with a population over 2,000, and maintain our current boundaries, you're gonna need a population of 2250. We meet the threshold right now to incorporate as a fifth class city. And so one of the things that we have looked at is based on projected growth, we feel that we were undercounted in the 2020 census. We were able to go to the Census Bureau and say, hey, like, using GIS maps, we can show you, you missed all of these homes based on the maps you gave us. And they said, yeah, it's too bad. Cost to redo the census was gonna be 250,000 is what they estimated for us. We're like, yeah, that's not gonna be worth it for us. But you add on the 40 to 50 homes they missed, another 60 homes that have built since then, another 4 or 5 years of growth. Oh, we got some people coming in. There you go. And you're looking at potentially a population that's not gonna be over 2250, but over 2000.
Okay.
Come on in, we just got started. Lots of space.
This is it's lots of.
Lots of space, yeah.
Right.
We're gonna pass around the collection plate in a few minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's an important part of the discussion for us is. If we don't have this discussion now, when we meet the criteria to go as a fifth class city. And we wait, and 5 years or so, we wanna rehab the discussion. And we have a 2030 census population of 2100. We would then have to look at changing our geographic boundaries in a smaller sense to pursue incorporation. Otherwise, you gotta wait till the year 2040. That's really one of the driving factors at this point in time is. You know, this is a window of opportunity we have to look at this, that may be gone for another 15 years after this. Cause this is a multi-year process to go through. In looking at, we're in the process of updating our master plan, looking at population projections from Esri and other reputable private party data places. You know, we're gonna be in the 2100 range by the year 2030, so. In terms of what we do as far as taxation here in the village. These are all the taxes you pay as a resident of the village of Lake Isabella. With the county and the wide array of services they continue to provide to us from their general fund at 6.61 mils. Your state education tax at 6 mils. Your ISD taxes, that's your special ed, your voc, their operating is over 5 mils. Chippewa Hill Schools, that's the district that we are in. They have 3 different debt millages on your tax bill that are 3.8 and change. Our lake restoration millage approved by the voters in 2023 at 2.9. Everyone pays a fire millage or assessment, whether you pay it to us in Broomfield Township or right to the township in Sherman Township side of the village. That's one. Paying 1 mil to the county for their medical facility. You got your 2 township operatings. Commission on Aging, your I-Ride, and then you're operating for the village. And then your Parks and Rec below that, so the amount of the property taxes you pay. Less than 3% come to operate our general operations of the village. I know people say they pay a lot of taxes, and you do. But knowing where those dollars go is pretty important because you're paying more to operate the county medical facilities and pay for the school's debt than you are to fund our operations in this building. Now, one of the things that we've heard a lot of feedback from people worried about, you know, what becoming a city would mean to the character of the community. And I think all of us know where this is at, right? Got the bridge in the background. And it's known as Mackinac City, but it's not. Legally, it is the village of Mackinac City. Mackinac City is a village. Cass City over in the thumb is a village. The village of Douglas over by Lake Michigan side is a city. They are the city of the village of Douglas. So changing from a village to a city, it really doesn't have anything to change the character of your community. It's really more about the legal structure of your organization in terms of your government. It doesn't mean that we're gonna have you know, sidewalks, strip malls, all kinds of stuff that people have come up and said, you know, we're gonna have all this density. It's like, no, you know, that's not what it does. It just changes the structure of your local government and somewhat the name. Because obviously the village of Douglas said, yeah, we're gonna keep that for a while. I think they now go by the city of Douglas, but they used to be just the city of the village of Douglas, and that's what it is in their charter, but what you do have to do differently as a city from a village, there's really three things. You have to have your own assessor and your own board of review. You've got to bill and collect taxes for other entities. And then you have to hold all your elections. So we, as the village, used to hold our own elections. We held them here in this room. And we did that up until the state took elections away from villages in the year 2012. So we had always done our own because we were in 2 townships. Made a ton of sense for our folks to come here to vote as opposed to 5 miles north or 5 miles south. We have full-time staff, it's easier to get your absentee ballots, all that kind of stuff. The state said, no, we're gonna one size fits all you, and no village can do it anymore, because there was only about 20 of us who were still doing our own elections. And they said, it's just not worth this at the state end to try and keep up your guys' training with cities and townships, so. We already do our own and have forever our own summer taxes. So we would have to do another bill, and then assessing is typically done through a contracted relationship with a private party. And then you'd have to have your own board of review. So, yeah, we already do our own summer bill, so we need to add a winter bill. And then we need to find some able and willing bodies that would want to serve on a board of review. Now, what that might cost us. So the village has about 2,300 parcels, and the going rate for the most recent year for contracting an assessor is at $15 a parcel. You add in your added cost for doing board of review, that kind of stuff, and a very fair conservative number is 40,000. To do another tax bill, you're probably talking about $2,500 by the time you do the printing and mailing, maybe a little bit less. And then elections, depends on the year. 25 to 30 would be on the very high end of the spectrum. And then obviously years where you don't have elections, like 2025, you don't really have much of any expense, so. Maybe possibly we need to add a part-time office position to help with some of that extra tax billing stuff. But other than that, that's really the only staffing change that we would look at having any impact in this process. So how do we fund that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, our village charter tax our tax at 1 mil. You also pay 1 mil to your respective townships. If we were to incorporate as a city and keep our current charter, but go from 1 to 2, so it is a tax neutral change on that side of the tax equation for you as the voter. You're gonna see an additional revenue of 120,000 based on our current value, plus the 1% admin fee on the property taxes we collect. So ballpark, you're talking 142,000 to offset 82 in costs, give or take. They have 2 mills would bring in 236. When you look at all that, that's what it's looking like for us, in terms of why we think this is. Another reason to present this community is you're already paying these taxes. You're paying this to your townships right now. And as we look at what we are doing as a community and say, gosh, we can look at this and bring in, roughly $84,000 a year back to your community and reinvest it here. That seems like a pretty decent discussion to have. Because as we look ahead, in terms of where we could fund those things or what we could do with them, there's some definite needs in our community. But in addition to just keeping those dollars in your community, you'd have elections here. We have full-time staff. We're open 5 days a week. You can drop off your tax bill. You can get your tax bill. You're not going to someone's house and leaving it in a drop box, all of our stuff is online. Everything we do is online. Stream all of our meetings. You would have uniform assessing. Right now we do in the community, and that is, I've been here 21 years. That's not the norm. For many, many years, the townships had different assessors. And that sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. That's all I'll say. And more importantly, I think, if you have a problem with your taxes, your board of review is your neighbors. It's whoever in the community wants to serve on that board. So it's people in your community who you would be able to go and present those concerns about, as opposed to the township assessing boards, which I think they have one village resident on either of those township boards right now, in terms of the assessing. But there are three main areas that we look at in terms of what the most pressing needs are ahead in our community. That additional funding is going to be needed in one way or another potentially. And we're just gonna go through them right in order. Your local streets, policing, and lake restoration. Lake restoration is pretty self-explanatory. But looking at how we fund roads in Michigan. So everything, government has these great systems. So this is known as the National Functional Classification System. So these are roads that are federal aid eligible. So all your gas tax money that you pay, your federal gas tax dollars can go to fund things that are federal aid eligible. In the village, those are the orange roads, Coldwater through Rowland and River, which none of those are in our road network. Those are all county roads. So none of the village streets are eligible for federal aid projects. We rely on a act in Michigan called Act 51. And Act 51 creates the Michigan Transportation Fund. And the short and sweet of it is, for every gallon of gasoline or diesel you buy, you're paying 31 cents of Act 51 tax. That Act 51 money is put into the MTF, the Transportation Fund. And then Act 51 says, here's how we're gonna divvy up that money. The state of Michigan, big brother, we're gonna take 39 and 1% off the top. Our little brother, the county road commissions, those 83 are gonna take another 39.1%. And then our little brother, local government, cities and villages, we're gonna give you 21.8. The state's position is that, you know, the bulk of traffic in the state in terms of economy and just total traffic volume are on the blue and the orange. Where the biggest number of miles are in the gray. So, like I said, government loves formulas. Here's the Act 51 formula. You go right to the state of Michigan website. This is the breakdown for 2027. But in cities and villages, you have major and local streets. Our major streets in the village are pretty simple. If they've got yellow and white lines, they're a major street. If they don't, they're a local. So you have your population, you have your mileage, and you add those into the formula and you get how much money you're gonna get. So for the village, per capita, per person, get about $70 for major, another 23 for local. For the mileage part of the deal, almost 20 grand per major, about 5 for local. Now with your major streets, there is a population multiplier. So if you are over 2,000 people, it goes up 10%. The act does require that your first priority and your first investments have to be on the major street system. In terms of what our local road network looks like, we have the 4th largest road network of anybody in our area. Mount Pleasant obviously has the biggest network at almost 76 miles. Alma, 48 miles, Big Rapids, 38. Then Lake Isabella, 26.34 miles. That's a ton of miles, especially with 18 and a half miles of local streets. We're very similar in size of our road network to Clare, St. Louis, and Ithaca. And then you get down to your smaller communities, Pullman, Edmore, Shepherd, Rosebush, much smaller networks. So those are our 7.8 miles. El Camino, most Queensway, Tequesta, Bundy, El Clubhouse. And for that, by the time you factor in your population and your miles, you got $280,000 a year. About $36,000 a mile total at the end of the day. We get enough money that we can maintain our major streets. you know, we're not gonna do, new things like new turn lanes and that kind of stuff, but to keep the major streets functional and drivable, that we can make that work. We really can. Our local streets, are a different story, but, we use a thing called, PASER, pavement scoring rating system. And based on the observed condition of the asphalt, you assign it a numerical value. So our major street network, you can see that we've done some significant investments in recent years in order to 6.3 on our major network. So you're in the good area. And those investments look like this. Almost 775,000 since 2019. So this last project we did, Clubhouse Drive, was 254,000. We were able to get a grant to cover half of that cost. We apply every year for funding out of that program. We've been successful 1 out of 4 years, so. Going at that ratio, probably another 2 or 3 years out before we get more grant money to do a project like that, although we've applied to do a project in the spring of 26 with that type of funding, but. That's what we're doing on your major streets, because we have the money to keep them good. All these other streets, known as your local streets, 1.5 miles of gravel, 17 miles of paved, are a much different story, folks. Because when you do the population and the mileage, you get $139,000 of funding to maintain that network for about $7,500 a mile. There's just no human way possible that you can make that amount of money, keep that network good, which our PASER ratings show. The bulk of the network was paved in 27, so we started rating the entire network in 2008. We did like 13 miles in 07, and you can see that they have continued to decline over years. Now, they don't see a ton of heavy traffic or truck traffic, so that asphalt is approaching 20 years in terms of its life, which is pretty darn good for 2.5 inches of asphalt. But it's certainly getting at a point where it needs a new top. And some areas need a little bit more than that, but the last time we touched those type of streets in any significant form was through special assessment. So the way that those projects were all structured was the area to be paved, the number of lots that fronted it were counted, and then the project costs were divided by that number. And if you had 2 lots, like I live on 2 lots, I paid twice. If you have 1, you paid 1, if you had 3, you paid 3. But each lot owner, each lot was assessed, 1,800, 1474, 2189, or 1280. So that last one in 07, that's when we did the 13-mile project. So that's why it was 1.5 million. And you got that economy of scale built into that project to make it much more palatable for people. So, yeah. Well, back to that 26.3 miles. That's what everyone else is getting. And so we are at a very poor location in that chart with a big network and a small population comparable. So Claire, that has a very similar size network and a very similar size taxable value, they're getting $544,000 a year in their major or local street funding from the state. But then they supplement that by an additional 3 mills. So that's adding over another $400,000 to their street funding. St. Louis, about 900,000. Ithaca, they're at 550, 560. So as we look at that and say, gosh, we are way behind where our neighbors are in terms of the amount of money they're putting into their streets to keep them in good shape. Local street funding is definitely an area where we see a need in the future to do something. And with the amount of money coming from the state right now, it's not something that we have the ability to do ourselves. When you break it back down to your per mile cost, only Rosebush gets less per mile on their majors than we do. and nobody gets less per mile than the locals than we do. Yeah, that's just the nature of how that system works. The rewards density, which we don't have, quite frankly, and we're not designed or built for density, so. The next area, another fun topic, is police services. So in case you didn't know, at the end of 24, Isabella County discontinued providing road patrol services and terminated our contract with them. The last year that we have full data for was 2022. We had 627 non-ambulance calls for service. We had 301 that year for ambulance. 95 for more serious issues. Those would be in your burglary, your larceny, your harassment, threats, stolen vehicles, that kind of stuff. 127 vehicle stops, 42 for animal control. So not a huge demand for law enforcement presence. Again, this is in an area though, at a time when you had the sheriff's department operating 24 hours a day. As we've gotten away from that, one of the really unfortunate things is that the county's dispatching system no longer has the ability to geographically break out calls from an area. They switched their CAD program in 24 and they can't geographically isolate like the village from the rest of the county to see what calls we specifically have in the village. What we don't know, and these are huge issues. You know, if the county is gonna try and present another millage in 26. We don't know if the voters would support that new millage. We don't know what service level they would try and fund with that millage. Right now, we're hearing that they're not planning on presenting something in 26. But that's not a definitive, that's not, something set in stone. There's nothing that, we can go off of long-term to give you a better funding option in terms of what the county may or may not do in 2026. So our current situation is the Michigan State Police are backfilling the coverage for the entire county. The village in Mount Pleasant have an agreement that will cover about 20 hours per month. That's really what you've got at this point in time. The county did keep their marine patrol unit, so we do contract with them for lake patrols, but we did peel back on that amount to invest more in the road patrol side of the equation. Voters in the community did approve a dedicated millage to fund patrols of the sheriff's department back in 2022. But obviously we don't have a sheriff's department anymore. So how's that look in the future? Well, to not renew or extend and have Michigan State Police provide sole coverage is an option. We could extend the agreement, could come to a new agreement with the county perhaps, or we could start our own police department. All these dependent on what the needs end up being for our community in a world where you don't have 24-hour coverage from the sheriff's department. And looking at, what that cost might be, it's gonna vary on what agency and, what you agree to in the contract. But realistically, if you're gonna contract with the city, you're gonna be $250 an hour ballpark. And honestly, I think if you were to go back to the county, if they were to have an option, you'd probably be at $150 an hour, give or take, if they were to fully fund it correctly. Starting our own police department, we've looked at, just hypothetical costs and what that could take. Looking at a 1.5 full-time officer type level of funding, you'd need 80 to 100 to start up the department and then 170 to 200 annually a year to operate it. Shepherd operates 2 full-time officers. Breckenridge has 1 and then part-time. There are some other models out there that we've looked at, like Barrington, they are all just part-time and they're all moonlighting from other departments that has some risk and concerns on our end in terms of, conflicting, training type standards and those type of issues. But, our preferred option at the village has been to contract that service out with somebody else just to avoid that extra liability, that extra administrative stuff, all those type of issues on our end of the equation. But the number of dance partners out there are pretty slim at this point in time without the county. Really, we're looking at our agreement with the city is really kind of a Band-Aid to buy us time to see if the county is gonna bring something back. And see how this new reality impacts. You know, the more frequent issues that we see in our community, you know, the property crime, the nuisance, that type of stuff. You know, so this is a situation that we are monitoring very closely. It's not one that we can give you any type of definitive answer on today in terms of what it's gonna look like in a year or 2 years from now. But I think we have looked at the options in front of us and know. You know, depending on what cards the dealer turns up on the poker table. How we can play the chips in our hand. Yeah.
Okay, so the police, so we voted to pay some tax for policing.
Oh.
And then they stopped, so what's going on with that money then?
So we didn't take it,
You didn't take it from us?
no, so that was in, we
Okay,
talked about that last year in our newsletter, our summer newsletter extensively, is that. The voters approved 1/3 of the mill, 1/3 of mill to cover dedicated patrols with the sheriff's department.
right,
We levied, so that was approved in 22. 22, 23, the. Last year was 24, 23, so it was approved in 22. November election 22, the first tax bill we could levy that was summer of 23.
okay,
We levied it summer of 23, collected 35,000 roughly, give or
okay,
take. Summer of 24 comes around and we have to do those tax bills. The village council said, you know, look, we don't know if the county's gonna have this service for the year. Cause they're saying by the end of the year, we might not have it. So we said, we're not gonna levy it,
okay,
so we didn't collect it.
okay,
So, but we continued to fund the service until the end of. When the sheriff's department shut up shop, yeah, you know, so. In total, we collected about $36,000 and spent about 55,000. We paid for that out of our general fund.
Oh,
Yeah, so, but we did not feel it was responsible to go out and say, yeah, we don't know if we're gonna take this. And then obviously we didn't levy it on your bill this year.
Right.
You know,
okay, so when you say we're working with the city, what city are you talking?
Mount Pleasant.
Mount Pleasant.
So
Okay.
the village council approved, a small contract with them, at their meeting in July. That we're gonna hopefully have the first time out here, towards the end of the month, but. You know, their rate is $250 an hour. And, you know, that's why we say it's, you know, 20 hours or so a month, and it's really about. Visibility, having presence so that, you know, there is that knowledge that there is additional police presence out here occasionally to help be a deterrent. To help with some traffic issue. But it's not gonna be, you know, 24-hour coverage. You know, and quite candidly, I live here, and we don't need 24 hours. You know, ideally, I think our sweet spot probably is about 20 hours a week. Give or take, you know. But one of the issues that we have with the county is their labor agreement didn't allow for them to have a part-time deputy. He had to be full-time for their union. So we were paying overtime for them to come out and do it. We couldn't just say, hire, you know, someone who's retired to come do this part-time. You know, as we look ahead, you know, are those conversations that we can re-engage with the city potentially if that turns out to be a better scenario? Or even, you know, is the county willing to fund a position that we pay for entirely? And that was really, really frustrating throughout the entire debacle of 2024 with the county and what ended up happening. And at no point did they come to us and say, you have a contract with us. Would you be willing to up that to fund one position full-time to keep a deputy on?
Right.
Never had that conversation, never presented it to us at all. Wise Township, same thing, they had a contract. Never went to them. You know, so that was, it was really frustrating because it was very apparent to them it was all or nothing. There was not a scenario that they would entertain where they would keep 4 or 6 deputies. It was the full 20 or you get nothing, you know, and. So when we look at the advantages of incorporation, besides being able to reinvest in either the lake and the roads or whatever our policing needs end up being. You have full political control over the community. Full control over your operational millages, reduces the layer of government, and it ensures you have consistent assessing. The incorporation process is governed through the State Boundary Commission. Beginning steps, we have to circulate a petition. And with a map that has a legal description and boundary, so we've got petition language, we've got the map ready to go in all that area. Based on our population, we have to collect 100 signatures of registered voters. And once we do that, assuming we move forward to that stage, we would then submit that to the State Boundary Commission and the township. And then they have the state 60 to 220 days to survey or have a hearing for us. So this is why it takes a couple of years. After you submit that, your first hearing, collects comments. There's a 30-day additional comment period. Both the village and both townships are allowed to address the State Boundary Commission in terms of what that process means, what the impact's gonna be. At the end of that, they give you a written summary of your questions. When we did this, so the village is the newest incorporated community in the state. So when our forefathers went and did this back in 1995, 96, 97, 98. You know, questions, why is incorporation necessary? What services? You know, what's the impact on the township and the communities? Pretty standard stuff. The law does require a division of assets. This is something the village has been very consistent and clear about. We have no intention of pursuing this, forcing this issue. We have no intention of asking the townships to figure out what the division of assets would be based on our value. Why? Because we know that they're gonna lose part of the tax base. The village represents about 45% of Broomfield's taxable value and 47% of Sherman, so their future tax revenue is going to go down. And knowing that, we don't wanna say, we also wanna take a bunch of your money on the way out the door. That just isn't something that appeals to any of us. And it's not entirely all negative because they do see some cost benefit in terms of fewer assessing parcels, fewer election demands, those type of stuffs, but. You know, the net impact, you know, 35 to 40,000 roughly per township, so. Then, you know, other extenuating factors out there that may actually help, particularly both townships in the long term. Really Sherman. So the village is part of what's known as a local road task force with the county and. Part of planning out capital projects in the long term, the county is planning to redo Water Road in the next 5 years. The township would have to cost share in that project. We do not, because we're an Act 51 entity, so. If we're incorporated city, that section within the city, the townships wouldn't be asked to cost share with the road commission. The other obviously concern be the fire department. We've been very clear and upfront that we want to continue that relationship. We've reaffirmed that through a letter. We've had conversations with the chief. You know, we have no intention of changing the fire department. We still expect everybody to pay 1 mil for the fire department. We've nothing that we're looking at hopefully changing in that realm there. The State Boundary Commission issues a recommendation. If they give you the recommendation, which in 1990, gosh, what was that, 7, 8. Looks like this. Summary of facts, findings. Then you move forward with electing a 9-member charter commission. So. You must reside in the area to be incorporated. You must have 20 people sign your nominating petition. And you have to be a resident of the village for 30 days. That 9-member board has 90 days from when they first convene to draft the charter. Now the great thing about being a home rule village is we already have charter. And there's not a whole lot that we would think needs to be changed with the charter. So it could be a pretty simple, straightforward process. Our current charter has a provision in there that we have to do a charter review every 10 years. So we've gone through that process twice. We did a charter revision committee. And there's been a handful of amendments over the years, but in general, when people go through our charter, they say it's pretty functional, works pretty good for us. Once they convene and the governor's office signs off on the charter, then there would be an election to approve the charter. So if it's approved, that completes the cityhood process, because at the same time, you also vote for the newly created city offices. So that's when you would vote for your city commission at that point in time, same election. So if they vote no, you don't incorporate, process ends. So some of the questions we received so far, does it mean we have to put in sewers? No. Put in a water system? No. Do we get a post office? No. Do we have to have a police department? No. We could do that right now. We could put in sewers right now. We could have a water system right now. Stuff. And the post office, we're not getting a post office. Does it mean the lake will be public? Well, the lake is already public. It's considered limited access because your boat launch sites are all under the LIPOA's control and ownership. None of that would change. But the body of water itself is a public body of water, which is why you pay a tax on your village tax bill to help restore that body of water through our joint lake restoration project with the association. But the waters are a publicly owned resource of the state of Michigan. Why you gotta have a fishing license from the state of Michigan and a boating license and all that fun stuff. But the parks, nothing changes. Would we look to expand our boundaries? Nope. We're not gonna try and land grab. We're not gonna do any of that stuff. Does it mean we're gonna have marijuana shops, street lights and strip malls? We can already do all that. We just don't want to. We are probably gonna add a couple more street lights, with the lack of policing. There's some areas that we just wanna improve. You know, the illumination of to act as a deterrent, but that's, you know, a few isolated locations. Strip malls are controlled through our zoning ordinance. Marijuana shops, we don't allow marijuana shops in the village. Property taxes. So we're looking at this as a tax neutral change, because if we can just redirect the 1 mil from the township to us, that side of the ledger doesn't change. And on the other side, you get your board of review of Lake Isabella residents and your own assessor to determine those values. So, you know, it would really be the 1 mil to 2, and we're not looking to replace that third of the millage bill patrol at this time, because we don't know what that solution long term may be. If being able to fund that through that recapture turns out to be the best option, that would be what we would look at. So there's that slide from earlier with all your taxes that you pay. We got asked this a bunch of times, you know, how are my property taxes gonna change? What are they gonna do? How much are my taxes going up? And in Michigan, your property taxes are a combination of your millage rate and your taxable values. That green side over there is what we've been saying is tax neutral. Going from 1 to 2, just diverting that township millage to us. That side of the equation is tax neutral, it doesn't change. You would get 2 tax bills in the future. You have a summer bill, you have a winter bill. You wouldn't have the 3. Those are the millages from what is currently being levied that you'd see in those summer and winter bills. So your city village operating would be the 2 mills, your lake restoration, your fire millage, your county operating, your education tax, your chip hills operating. So if you're homestead, you don't pay that. That's on the non-homestead property for your 18 mills for the school district. Then your 3 school district debt millages. And then the winter, You know, because that 6.6 mils that the county already bills you, you know, you need to pay for their IROD, their med facility, their parks and the commission on aging on top of that. And then you've got our meager recycling fee per household at $15 a home. And then the intermediate school districts operating special ed in both villages. No different than what you're seeing now. The other side of that equation is your values. So Michigan does a mass appraisal type system. So it's a system that statewide factors in cost approach, sales, to calculate your values, with the end result being that your assessed value should be about 50% of market value. That's what shows up as like your state equalized value, your SEV. Your taxable value is the basis for your property taxes. And that has a capped growth. So under our system here in Michigan, your equalized value swings with the market. Can go up, can go down. It's not capped. That's not the value that gets used for your property taxes. That's your taxable value. So when you buy, those numbers get reset to the same amount. And your SEV goes with the market. Your taxable is capped at 5% of the rate of inflation, as long as there's no transfer of ownership or additions to the property. So if you build a garage, you build an addition, you know, you're gonna get dinged for that investment. But the taxable side is the cap side. And then when it sells, that's the uncapping or the pop-up, as it's called a lot of times. And that jumps right back up to that same value. So that side of the ledger, then you would have say, because your assessor is in the village, your board review is at the village. Hello. So wrapping it up here. It's really gonna be a multi-year process if we go through it, because it requires 2 elections. In Michigan, you have 3 legally allowed election dates. The first Tuesdays in May, August, or November. Unless it's a presidential primary every 4 years, so there'll potentially be one in February or March. Depending on what happens in that scenario, but. To meet the election slots available and the lead up time, because you have to have ballots and stuff ready. You have to have ballot material 14 weeks in advance. You know, that's why it takes a long time to do those. We do believe it's gonna be at least tax neutral or even a tax savings in the long term to our residents. We think it's a better service delivery in terms of having a building that's gonna be here 5 days a week. And if we wait and have a population of under 2250, we might not be able to have this conversation again until 2040. So with that, we've got one more of these next Thursday night planned right now, and then obviously we're gonna talk more about it at our council meeting next Tuesday night. But I will answer whatever questions you folks have. Sorry for the doom and gloom about roads and police.
Well, I don't really. I guess. So how would you, well, you have to do the petition, get
Yep.
100 signatures first. then.
Yep.
Okay, so I listened to one of your things online.
Okay,
And you talked about a mayor and all this.
Yes.
So what's all
Sure.
that?
so right now our village council, Dave Torgerson is our village president. Instead of village president, you have a mayor. Instead of 6 council members, you would have 6 city commission members.
Okay, and do all these people get paid?
So they get paid $15 and 25 for officers.
And that all would stay the same?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
So that is going up in 2027. So our current charter says that if you change the compensation of elected officials, it doesn't take effect till the expiration of all current terms. So the council voted a year ago to change that, to 100 a meeting for the officers and 50, I think, for everybody else, or 75. And one of the reasons that we did that, knowing that isn't gonna go into effect until 2027, when realistically, I think 3 or 4 of the current 7 members aren't gonna be on the board. is we're struggling to find people.
to do that.
And if we're gonna ask, I'm 45, you know, I've got 2 kids and they're old enough to stay by themselves, but you wanna get someone younger involved and they need a babysitter for their kids, you know, that's something that we looked at and said, you know, times are different now. They
Mhm.
really truly are. The generation of people who are joiners to your civic organizations, your churches, your chamber of commerce, all those things. That has shrunk considerably from even the 80s, even the 90s. So if we're gonna ask someone to make that type of time commitment to show up at least one night a month, maybe 2, do additional work in the community, like, you know, $100 for a council meeting is a pretty fair compensation for that type of work, we think. It's really consistent and below what everybody else is paying too, so,
Hmm, okay.
you know, but yeah, we're, um, we've went what? Our last 4 elections, we had 1 contested seat. It's like,
Oh,
you
I
know,
see.
people aren't coming to join up and you think of Lake Isabella. We are incredibly unique because we require not 1, but 2 organizations to run our community that each require 7 board members, 9 board members of the association. Our board members can't be their board members can't be our board members. So right there off the bat, you're talking 16 people to run 2 organizations. Then you get in your planning commission, that's another 7. They can swap, you know, between like the lake committee and that kind of stuff. We have another 5-member ZBA, we have a 3-member board of ethics, we have a 9-member Parks and Recreation Committee. You're running the well pretty dry after a while. And it really goes back to time, you know,
Right,
I'm just gonna use myself as an example. My daughters are 12 and 16, and 16-year-old doesn't have her full license yet. So mom and dad are still driving practice every night. We've got cheerleading, we got softball, we've got volleyball, like, you know, both parents work, you know,
right,
is this a reality of what our society is like today?
right,
Um,
okay. Well, that's,
Tim, what do you think your timeline laid out? I mean, after these, I mean, when.
yeah,
I mean, read your crystal ball, what do you think you're gonna?
so realistically, assuming we move forward with collecting signatures, which I think the council's gonna sign off on doing that. I would like to be able to have signatures done, you know, by the end of October at the latest. So you'd submit that to the state, realistically, 60 to 220 days. You'd be looking at going through that process with your first possible election being August of 26 for a charter commission. And knowing that takes up to 90 days, then you're looking at probably the May election date of 27 for your final vote. That's realistically the time frame that I see.
And then you said it becomes effective.
Right away.
If passed, it's immediate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that we struggled with when we incorporated 98 is, you know, if the voters came out and voted to incorporate as a village on April 28th, April 29th, you're a unit of government, folks, like, you have no road, no money, no ordinances, no policies, no staff, like, what do you do? So, one of the reasons why we have maintained a contractual relationship for a lot of our services is because that was what we had to do to exist. And in the long run, it's worked out pretty well for us. We have no legacy costs as an organization, so there's no pension problems, there's no long-term retiree healthcare problems. So that it's a different way to operate than most do, but I think it's actually probably a better way in a lot of sense. Because we keep our internal numbers very low. And we make sure that our staff can do multiple different jobs and.
So that doesn't won't impact like any of your financial reporting or accounting or
No.
all that just rolls right over like nothing changed.
Yeah. Yes, like on our website, we maintain all of our financial reports for the whole world to see. Right there under your government.
So yeah, just becoming a city doesn't change any of the
No,
reporting requirements of the village.
no, so
Yeah.
like, there's all of our audits, there's all of
Yeah.
the budgets. One of the things that we did as an organization, we worked with the council. And we came up with, you know, a lot of places have a mission statement type thing, but we did it around what we call a vision frame where. In terms of understanding what makes us tick in terms of an organization and community. We're a bedroom community, folks. You're not gonna have large scale industrial development. We don't have water sewer, so you're not gonna see a ton of commercial development. We wanna be the place where people wanna live in Isabella County. And so, you know, our values are transparency, integrity, professionalism, being welcome. So we try and put as much as we humanly possibly can on our website. It makes it great for us, you don't have to call us. You know, you can access it whenever you want. You know, so we look at how we measure that through our asset management, through our code enforcement, through property values. Having, you know, qualified, trained staff to help. You know, we're gonna do quality infrastructure, we're gonna have good public safety. You know, we're gonna try and engage in our community in ways that make sense, and that's how we operate, that's what drives us as an organization. You know, that, we don't expect any of that to change, you know. Like in, you know, in Romeo and Juliet, when, you know, Juliet says, "Would a rose by any other name still not smell as sweet?" Like, you can call a rose a tulip or a, you know, whatever, it's still gonna have those physical characteristics. That's what we see as a community, as an organization. Wouldn't change the lake millage, any of that stuff. Other questions?
What do you think?
So, I live here. Yep, live over on Bundy, not a big secret where I live. Yeah, the first meeting we had, you know, like, I live here, I'm not gonna lie to you, you're gonna come to toilet paper my house, that's like, I don't want eggs on my garage. I'll be honest, I don't really like government, I don't like paying taxes.
Right?
So if I can keep my tax dollars in my community. That's a scenario that appeals to me. It really does. We have a very good functioning model here in terms of. Our clerk is a member of the council, our treasurer is a member of the council, but their duties are done by professional staff. You know, I deal with clerk duties, Jessica does the treasurer's duties, so. That ensures continuity and consistent service delivery to you, the resident, that. Townships can't always provide. You know, it's not a throw shade at them, but. You know, a lot of times you see people who are doing that as a secondary function of their professional life. They're working a regular job and then they're doing it at nights on the weekends. And you know, we think we can do this better and more efficiently. And it's more convenient for you to come here and complain than drive outside the church for money, you know? That's right.
Just to let you know. I was completely against the village, completely against the village,
That's an understatement.
and I fought it all the way. And then there was an opportunity to get on the board. Okay, and because I fought so hard, the board wasn't really. On board, Paul, but. After several meetings and after seeing how things operate. I believe the village was a good thing. With the city, I'm all for it, because all we're doing is taking our money from the two townships and bringing the tax money to us, so we can spend it on our stuff. The city, the township hasn't done one thing for us as far as spending in the last several years. They haven't done anything, okay? And I'm not knocking them, they're doing projects that they feel which is, you know, needed in the townships, it's just they don't feel that the village needs it. So I think we should get our money and operate the way we have it. So I'm all for the city. Okay. Which the council never thought I'd say that. I do, I mean, and I'll be honest with you. Our village, you know, turns to a city or not, if we don't keep him, we're in trouble, because he comes up with stuff, learn, you know, he doesn't just sit around, he looks at stuff, looks at bills, should we do this, should we not do that? It's well run because of Tim. And I'm not just puffing him up, I'm being honest.
I don't know, Paul and I used,
Yeah, we used to just buy, that's, you know.
I think it turned out that we didn't get along because we were too much like each other at first.
But I'm just saying that so that you know, I really, the city, I think is
Yeah.
a big plus for us. I really do. I looked at all angles to see if there was something that I was missing. I can't find anything.
You know, that model of having to contract out services has always given us a different perspective on how to solve problems. And that perspective has always been try and find the most economic solution in whatever that may be. You know, so looking at those needs of our community, it would have been, it sure is easier and lazier for me to say, yeah, we're just gonna do another special assessment on your roads and we're gonna do another special assessment or millage for police, and it's like. But if we can save you money. Like, that was one of the reasons why we did the trash pickup the way we did. You know, where we went to a single hauler. And we looked at that once Dent went out of business and retired, said, you know, we can streamline this and get everybody the same service and they'll be paying less money. Boy, that sounds like a good idea for our residents. So we structured it in a way that is unique, where most places, yeah, we're gonna do a one size fits all, you're gonna have one or two cans and you're gonna pay $20 a month, $15 a month, whatever on your water bill, you know, the day. Like, no, we've got people that are weekenders. Not a lot, but still like 15% of our homes are seasonal. You know, they're gonna put out maybe a bag or two. We got empty nesters, they might put out a bag or two. You got someone with a teenager and a tween that's gonna put out 20 bags a week, you know, but. So we worked with Kings and came up with a funding scenario that said, all right, you can still do tags. If you just wanna stop it out of bounds, buy a tag, you're good to go. You want 2 carts and 10 bags a week like me, I paid $205 a year.
Right.
You know, I was paying 80 a quarter with Granger, it's like, it saves me money, you know? Recycling, it's $15 a year. Like, we look at providing services in a way that makes sense financially for you, the resident. You know, that's why the police one is frightening, because the numbers are clear. It's gonna be a lot cheaper long term to do it ourselves than do it with the county or the city, and.
When you didn't collect the taxes that year, did you give up that millage then?
No, we could have, it expired this year.
Oh, it expired this year.
Yeah, so we could have collected on the 25 bill as well.
Okay, I just wondered if you could reinstate it, I didn't realize it expired this year.
We did a 3-year.
Yeah.
You know, we were specific when we did it that we limited it to the county. So. You know, with the council's direction from the last meeting. You know, we have that agreement in place with the city of Mount Pleasant through the end of 26. And. You know, by then we're gonna know what the county's plans are and what our community's needs are, and. You know, one of the things we talked about in that meeting. Because there is a substantial difference in cost from what we're doing with the county to the city. And the county was always the low end of the employment totem pole for law enforcement. And that's not a negative on them or their officers, but the city paid better. CMU paid better and had better benefits, tribal paid better, you know, so if you're trying to fund. You know, those 4 plus a state police post, the talent pool is what it is. You're gonna pull from the bottom up. So you constantly saw people leave to go to the city or to CMU, like, oh, if I go to CMU, my kid gets free tuition. So that's a heck of a perk for me now, so I'm gonna go work for CMU PD. So even if they were to bring it back, how long is it gonna take to bring in 20 people to do that? Montcalm County did the same thing. They eliminated road patrols. And it was 14 years, I think, before they were fully staffed, once they brought it back. And that was because our people left and went there when we shut up shop. But they were always down 2, 3, 4. They could just never build that back up to a place where people trusted they were gonna be a continual employer,
Right,
you know? And so if they bring it back with 6 deputies, 8 deputies, you know, with the addition to do some type of, yeah, if you want your own deputy, you could contract for that position, like a school resource officer like Beal had. You know, those are discussions I hope they have. But we haven't seen that yet. Right now, their focus from what we can see is trying to figure out what they're gonna do with the county building.
Mm.
You know, they're talking about moving out to the jail. Which isn't in the city, so.
I guess.
I know. No, thank you guys all for coming out.
Yeah, thank you.
For-
Yeah, definitely.
Put it on, yeah.
Yeah.